Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to unravel a story so unexpected. It really challenges everything you probably thought you knew about one of the world's most enduring and, yeah, volatile conflicts.
It really does. I mean, when we think of Iran and Israel today, what comes to mind? It's
Yeah.
adversaries, right? Deeply entrenched, locked in this fierce, seemingly unending struggle.
Absolutely. All the headlines, the rhetoric, the geopolitical chess moves, they all paint this picture of just constant enmity.
Yeah, perennial enmity. But, and this is the core of what we're digging into today, what if the deepest truths about this relationship, they aren't really found in today's headlines?
What if they're buried? Buried beneath decades of history? What if, for a really significant period, these two nations, the ones now seemingly poised against each other, were not just, quiet partners, but actual secret allies?
Forging a profound, pragmatic friendship built on mutual necessity and maybe surprisingly even a degree of, well, shared trust.
It sounds almost unthinkable now, doesn't it, in our current context?
It truly does. The idea that the foundations of their current animosity are actually built on the ashes of this deep strategic cooperation, it fundamentally redefines how we understand the modern Middle East.
Yeah, it forces you to reconsider just how fluid international relations can be.
And that precisely is our mission today. We want to unravel this unexpected story. Look at how and why this unlikely bond was forged, how it deepened over time, and then ultimately how it just spectacularly imploded.
Redefining, hopefully for you listening, what you thought you knew about one of the world's most critical geopolitical fault lines.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The genesis. Where did this secret alliance begin?
Right. We need to go back to a period of intense geopolitical upheaval, a really pivotal moment in the 20th century. The year is 1948.
And the State of Israel declares its independence.
Now, you have to really try and imagine the context here. This fledgling nation, it was born into a maelstrom, quite literally, immediately surrounded by a coalition of hostile Arab states.
The ink was barely dry on the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. And boom, it's embroiled in this desperate struggle for sheer survival.
The sense of precariousness was, well, it was absolute. Israel's very existence felt like it was hanging by the thinnest of threads.
An existential threat, right, from all sides. Its borders were contested, its new military was totally outnumbered and diplomatically isolated, to put it mildly.
There was this palpable desperation,
Mhm.
a profound geopolitical necessity for Israel to look beyond its immediate, really fiery borders. They needed allies, any allies,
Yeah.
really, however unlikely.
Just to ensure their national existence. They were kind of strategically orphaned in their own neighborhood.
And this is where the story takes its first really unexpected turn. Who answers this desperate call?
Not who you'd expect, not a traditional Western superpower, with some clear ideological alignment, not some distant neutral party.
No, it was the ancient imperial state of Iran.
Iran. At this time, Iran was under the rule of its monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a shrewd ruler, very pro-Western.
And this partnership, it wasn't born of shared ideology, like you often assume alliances are forged. Not at all.
No, this was meticulously constructed, pure, cold geopolitical necessity, calculated self-interest on both sides.
Right. For the Shah's Iran, Israel offered something crucial, a strategic counterweight in a highly unpredictable region.
A counterweight against what, though? That's the key question here.
Well, Iran, despite seeming like a regional power, faced these significant kind of complex dual threats, things that really concerned the Shah's government.
Okay, threat number one.
Firstly, there was this burgeoning tide of Arab nationalism sweeping across the Middle East. This pan-Arab sentiment, often secular, often socialist in its leanings, it was a powerful unifying force.
And the Shah viewed that with suspicion.
Profound suspicion. He saw it as a threat to his own monarchical authority. It could potentially destabilize the whole region, challenge Iran's historical influence, especially given Iran's non-Arab Persian identity.
Right, movements like Nasserism in Egypt were resonating hugely in the Arab world.
Exactly. And the Shah saw that as a potential threat, both internally to his stability and externally to Iran's positioning.
Okay, so that's Arab nationalism. What was the second, equally pressing threat?
Crucially, the looming specter of Soviet expansionism from the north. Iran shares this long, porous border with the Soviet Union.
A superpower with clear historical ambitions in the Middle East. Warm water ports, influence.
Precisely. The Cold War was intensifying, and the Shah was acutely aware of the Soviet threat, both to Iran's territory and its pro-Western alignment. He'd seen how the Soviets had tried to carve out influence before in Azerbaijan and Kurdistan.
So in this complex, dangerous regional chessboard, Israel suddenly looks like an opportune partner.
A unique and opportune strategic partner, exactly. Despite its own precarious position, it allowed Iran to diversify its alliances, not just rely solely on the West.
And create this potential strategic axis in the region, one that could implicitly counter both Arab nationalism from the West and the Soviets from the North.
It was a deeply pragmatic move, very calculated,
Yeah.
far removed from any kind of religious or, emotional sentiment at that stage.
So it really was a mutual lifeline then. This wasn't just Iran doing Israel a favor, not benevolence. It was a deeply pragmatic foundation, a two-way street. Both sides gained immensely.
Absolutely. For Israel, Iran wasn't just an ally.
Right.
In many critical ways, it became the ally.
A vital source of oil, right? The lifeblood for its new economy, its developing military.
And think about it in a region where oil was often being weaponized against Israel, having a secure, discrete supply. That was paramount. Absolutely essential.
And beyond oil.
Iran also provided this indispensable passage for intelligence gathering. I mean, the Middle East was largely hostile territory for Israel. Diplomatic channels closed, intel networks nearly impossible to set up.
So Iran became a crucial conduit.
Yes, it allowed Israel to gather vital information on Arab states, on Soviet activities in the region, even on internal dynamics across the broader Islamic world.
And a diplomatic bridge, too, you mentioned.
Indispensable. In a world where much of the Middle East, and frankly many other nations, wouldn't even acknowledge Israel's existence, let alone engage with it.
Iran provided this quiet back-channel link, a non-Arab Muslim nation.
Which offered Israel a crucial sense of legitimacy, a strategic foothold in a region that was otherwise just universally antagonistic.
The irony is it's staggering, isn't it? You have Arab armies publicly vowing to push Israel into the sea, declaring total opposition to its very existence.
And meanwhile, Iranian oil was quietly, consistently flowing into Israeli pipelines.
This wasn't just a one-off deal, not a couple of discrete transactions.
No. We're talking routine, highly integrated operations. Think about the sheer audacity, the strategic brilliance of this quiet arrangement, running completely counter to the public rhetoric of the time.
So this early stage, profoundly transactional in its origins, it laid the groundwork for something much deeper, more complex than just resource exchange.
Absolutely. It built a foundation of trust. Forged, really, in the crucible of these shared strategic anxieties, this common desire for regional stability, albeit under this cloak of absolute secrecy.
And here's where the narrative takes an even more fascinating turn, right? Because this alliance, it didn't just stay at the level of high-stakes geopolitics and, discrete oil deals.
No, it began to evolve in truly unexpected ways. The veil of secrecy surrounding their cooperation, it was incredibly thick, meticulously maintained, discrete channels, clandestine mechanisms.
But beneath that veil,
Deep roots of cooperation started to grow, extending far beyond geopolitics into cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, even human connection.
So tell us more about these mechanisms, the secrecy, but also how deep this cooperation really went beyond just the oil.
Well, what's truly fascinating is the sheer breadth and depth of it. The secret cooperation, we're talking about channels that ensured that quiet flow of Iranian oil into Israeli pipelines wasn't just sporadic. It was a consistent strategic lifeline.
Companies involved.
Yeah, like the Alat Ashkelon Pipeline Company, publicly Israeli, of course. But it had these deep, unacknowledged ties to Iranian supply chains, ensuring a steady energy flow.
And beyond the oil, you mentioned flights.
Right, the secret flights between Tehran and Tel Aviv. These weren't just, occasional things. They were routine, almost commonplace for those in the know.
Imagine that. Unmarked planes operating under the radar.
Ferrying not just goods or oil, but high-ranking officials, intelligence operatives, military advisors, back and forth with remarkable frequency.
It sounds like something straight out of a spy novel.
It was, in many ways. These weren't just polite diplomatic visits. Israeli military strategists, intelligence officers, they regularly traveled to Tehran, advising the Shah's security apparatus, SAVAK.
On what specifically?
Counterinsurgency tactics, intelligence gathering techniques, even modernizing their military hardware and training.
And in return?
Iranian officials provided valuable insights, regional political dynamics, Arab military movements, things Israel couldn't easily get elsewhere.
So this constant high-level interaction, all conducted in secret, under immense pressure, it actually built trust.
A significant level of trust, yes.
Yeah.
And mutual respect. It was a bond forged in that crucible of shared threats, common interests. It built this profound foundation that went way beyond what most observers at the time could possibly have imagined for these two nations.
They were sharing highly sensitive information, state secrets, if that leaked.
Disaster. Utter disaster for both sides. That's the level of trust we're talking about.
That's truly incredible. So this wasn't just a handshake agreement between leaders. It was a genuine exchange. Expertise, personnel, even a deeper understanding of each other's strategic challenges.
And this is where that twist comes in, something that I think will surprise many of you listening.
Because this alliance, born of cold, hard calculation, it actually blossomed into something deeper.
Something that hinted at a true, albeit discrete, connection between the peoples, not just the states.
More than just military stuff, then. A cultural human exchange that kind of defies the whole cold calculation idea.
Precisely. We have concrete examples, even if they were often obscured. Take, for instance, the role of Israeli agricultural experts in Iran.
Okay.
They played a pivotal, transformative role, bringing advanced Israeli agricultural techniques, things like drip irrigation, pioneered in Israel to Iranian deserts, developing drought-resistant crops.
So they literally made parts of the Iranian desert bloom.
They did, bringing forth life where there was barren land. This wasn't just about sharing tech, it was sharing knowledge, a vision for food security. It had a direct impact on the lives of ordinary Iranian farmers.
Tangible improvements to everyday life.
Exactly. And it wasn't just one way. Think about this. Iranian students were actively encouraged to study in Israeli universities.
Wow! Young Iranians pursuing higher education in Israel.
Yep. Studying engineering, medicine, you name it, interacting with Israeli peers, Israeli faculty. This wasn't just academic, it fostered deep intellectual and cultural exchange.
Building bridges between young minds, transcending the politics of the region.
It really was an exchange of ideas, of culture, a genuine, albeit highly discreet, warmth that just went against the grain of the geopolitical chessboard, against the prevailing regional animosities.
These were people-to-people connections, building a different kind of understanding.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it implies a level of human connection that's almost unimaginable today, isn't it? Given the current climate.
Can you imagine the personal stories? The quiet friendships forged between individuals from nations now seemingly destined for internal enmity?
An Israeli agricultural engineer maybe sharing a joke over tea with an Iranian farmer whose fields he helped transform.
Or an Iranian student debating philosophy with an Israeli classmate late into the night.
Or think about those clandestine meetings. Intelligence officers from Tehran and Tel Aviv sharing sensitive info, maybe a cigarette, a moment of shared humanity in the dead of night, all undertaken for the survival and prosperity of their nations.
It adds such a profound emotional layer to this alliance. It wasn't just state-to-state deals. It involved real human connections, built on trust, shared purpose, a surprising degree of mutual respect.
For many individuals involved, this wasn't just policy. It became deeply personal.
However, and there's always a however in these stories, this very bond, this deep trust and reliance, it also carried within it the seeds of its own destruction, didn't it?
It did. The gathering storm was brewing. Beneath the surface, slowly, relentlessly, carrying the inherent vulnerabilities of the alliance itself.
Like what? What were the vulnerabilities?
Well, the Shah's pro-Western stance, while it secured vital external allies and resources for Iran, it became heavily reliant on American support, and by extension, Israeli support.
And that reliance.
It created deep, festering resentment among significant segments of the Iranian population.
So it's almost like the stronger the alliance looked on the surface externally, the more it kind of inadvertently weakened the Shah internally.
That's a good way to put it. This external strength ironically fuels an internal vulnerability.
Why was this pro-Western stance, and especially the connection to Israel, so unpopular? What was the source of that resentment that eventually just exploded?
It was a complex web of grievances, really. A primary source was this perception of foreign influence, a feeling that Iranian sovereignty, Iranian cultural identity was being compromised.
A sense that the Shah was too close to the West.
Exactly. Many Iranians felt his close ties with the U.S., and by extension Israel, alienated Iran from its regional and Islamic brethren. There was this growing sentiment that the Shah was too beholden to external powers.
That his modernization efforts were too westernized.
Yes, and that the alliance with Israel specifically was a betrayal of the Palestinian cause, a betrayal of broader Islamic solidarity.
And this feeling was particularly strong among certain groups.
Particularly strong and indeed quite vocal among religious conservatives and the burgeoning clerical class.
Which raises a really important question. How did these religious conservatives specifically view this relationship with Israel? It must have been an ideological clash of, well, monumental proportions, especially given their later stance after the revolution.
Monumental is the right word. For religious conservatives in Iran, figures like Ayatollah Khomeini, who would later lead the revolution. This alliance wasn't just a political mistake. It wasn't just bad strategy.
It was seen as something deeper.
A profound moral and theological betrayal. A betrayal of Islamic solidarity. They viewed any compromise, any cooperation with what they unequivocally termed the Zionist entity.
They always use that term, Zionist entity.
Always. They saw cooperation as fundamentally illegitimate, morally corrupt. In their framework, Israel wasn't just a state. It was an occupying force, an illegitimate implant.
And an extension of Western imperialism, particularly American influence.
Exactly. Right in the heart of the Islamic world. So, to align with Israel, in their eyes, was to abandon the Palestinian people, betray the broader Muslim community, the Ummah, and compromise Iran's own Islamic authenticity.
So this ideological rift was deep, fundamental, unbridgeable for them.
Absolutely unbridgeable. It set the stage for the dramatic and ultimately devastating ideological shift that was coming. Their opposition was this constant, simmering undercurrent, nurtured in mosques, in underground networks, ready to boil over.
And boil over it did. We fast forward to 1979.
The Iranian Revolution erupts, a truly seismic event, reverberated across the globe, completely reshaped the geopolitical landscape.
And the Shah, the very architect of this unlikely secret alliance with Israel, he's dramatically overthrown.
And what followed wasn't just a change in government, not just swapping one leader for another.
No, it was a fundamental, visceral, seismic shift in ideology, one that would redefine Iran's place in the world and, crucially for our story, irreversibly alter its relationship with its former ally.
That's right. The new Islamic Republic, established under the absolute leadership of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, immediately signaled a complete dramatic reversal of Iran's foreign policy, especially concerning Israel.
So under the Shah, Israel was a strategic partner, a discreet ally, a source of vital intelligence resources.
But under the new revolutionary regime, the lens completely changed. Israel was no longer viewed as a strategic partner. It was condemned as the little Satan.
The little Satan. What did that designation actually signify? What was the weight behind that term?
It was powerful, unambiguous, a statement of total ideological opposition. The United States, they deemed the great Satan, representing Western imperialism, perceived moral decay.
And Israel, as its close ally, its perceived regional outpost,
Was cast as the little Satan, an illegitimate entity, an affront to Islamic values, a direct extension of American and Western influence in the Middle East.
And this wasn't just rhetoric, was it?
Not at all. It became the cornerstone of the new regime's foreign policy towards Israel. The strategic pragmatism, the mutual benefit that had underpinned decades of alliance, utterly discarded.
Replaced by what?
Replaced by this revolutionary ideology, rooted in anti-imperialism, Islamic solidarity, and absolute opposition to Israel's very existence. Treaties were torn up, diplomatic ties severed immediately.
And the Israeli embassy in Tehran famously handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO.
A hugely symbolic act, signaling the complete break.
And here's the ultimate emotional, strategic turn, the heartbreaking irony of it all. That makes this story so profoundly tragic.
The very intelligence networks, the military expertise, the intimate knowledge gained during those decades of close, covert cooperation.
All those shared secrets, mutual insights, carefully cultivated relationships.
Suddenly became a double-edged sword.
A twist of fate almost too cruel to comprehend.
It is profoundly tragic. Think about the implications. The insights Iran had painstakingly gained into Israel's vulnerabilities, its military doctrines, its intel methods, security protocols, supply chains, even internal political dynamics, key personnel,
All that knowledge.
would later be weaponized against Israel. Iranian military and intelligence officials, many of whom had actually been trained by Israelis under the Shah,
Now found themselves using that very knowledge to strategize against their former mentors, their former allies.
and conversely, Israel's intimate understanding of Iran's internal workings, its military capabilities, its security apparatus, its political landscape, gleaned from years of close cooperation with the Shah's regime, access to the highest levels.
That also transformed overnight into a tool of rivalry.
So the shared secrets of friendship, forged in trust and mutual respect over decades.
Became blueprints for rivalry.
Exactly. Blueprints for strategic planning against each other. This profound irony, it just underscores the immense human and geopolitical tragedy of the situation.
Former allies who once trusted each other with their deepest secrets.
Became each other's most informed adversaries, and therefore, potentially most dangerous adversaries. The intellectual property of their cooperation was essentially repurposed for conflict.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that in the volatile world of international relations, knowledge, once a bond, can very quickly become a weapon.
And you can only imagine the human cost of such a drastic, overnight geopolitical pivot. Picture it, if you will.
Israeli intelligence officers, people who had once trained their Iranian counterparts, shared tactics, resources, maybe even meals in some covert location, away from public view.
Now watching in disbelief, horror perhaps, as their former students, their former allies, turned into their staunchest, most ideologically driven adversaries.
It must have been a crushing blow, a feeling of profound betrayal, not just strategic or political, but deeply personal, professional.
The very individuals they'd built trust with were now part of a regime vowing Israel's destruction.
Absolutely. And the human tragedy extends even further, doesn't it? Touching every level of that once secret relationship.
Consider the Iranian diplomats, people who once maybe shared a quiet laugh with Israeli officials at discreet gatherings in third countries, perhaps discussing cultural exchanges, collaborative efforts.
These same individuals, or maybe their successors from the new regime,
Were now denouncing Israel on the global stage, at the UN, using the most vitriolic, uncompromising language, fulfilling the new ideological mandate to the letter.
So this wasn't just a political divorce, not just a shift in policy or diplomatic recognition.
No, it was the shattering of a complex, multifaceted relationship, one that had woven together threads of high-level strategy, vital economic lifelines, subtle cultural exchange, and countless individual friendships and professional connections.
And the consequences of that shattering.
Deep emotional scars, scars that ran far deeper than just policy changes, and a legacy of profound mutual suspicion that, as we see so clearly today, persists with formidable intensity.
The trust, once so painstakingly built over decades of secret cooperation, shared interests.
Irrevocably broken.
Yeah.
Replaced by this ideological chasm that seems almost impossible to bridge now. The echoes of that betrayal, they resonate loudly in pretty much every interaction between these two nations today, defining their bitter rivalry.
So what does this all mean for us? For you, listening, trying to make sense of the world today? A world where the Iran-Israel conflict seems like a constant fixture.
Well, the story of the Iran-Israel alliance, it's not just some historical curiosity, right? Not just a forgotten chapter to dust off.
No, it's a profound lesson, a vital lesson in the inherent fluidity of international relations.
A stark, unforgettable reminder of how quickly allegiances can shift, often with really cataclysmic consequences.
It highlights that dangerous, often brutal dance between pragmatism, which once brought these nations together,
And ideology, which so violently tore them apart.
It truly emphasizes how yesterday's friend, under the right or maybe the wrong circumstances, can become tomorrow's sworn and most dangerous enemy.
It reminds us that geopolitical landscapes are never static, never set in stone. And understanding the complexities of the present requires a fearless, unflinching look into even the most uncomfortable, the most surprising truths of the past.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reinforces a crucial, nuanced perspective on the current conflict, a conflict that often seems so intractable.
Right. The deep-seated animosity we witness today, this seemingly unending rivalry,
Right.
it's not some eternal given, not some ancient, preordained hatred passed down through generations.
It is, rather, a tragic outcome, a deeply ironic outcome of specific, identifiable historical forces, profound ideological shifts, and as we've discussed, that intensely human element of betrayal, of disillusionment that followed the shattering of their secret alliance.
By understanding this surprising chapter, this hidden history of cooperation and then rupture, you gain, hopefully, a truly crucial, nuanced perspective on why the Iran-Israel conflict remains one of the most volatile, most complex challenges of our time.
It gives you a lens to view their current actions, rooted deeply in this past of unexpected intimacy and then profound betrayal.
So, as you reflect on this surprising history, maybe consider this provocative thought. How might that shared history of cooperation, the intelligence shared, the officials who once knew each other, these strategic insights gained, how might that, even in its current state of intense animosity, continue to subtly influence future interactions between these two nations?
Could the ghosts of that pragmatic past ever reemerge in some form? Or are the scars of 1979 just too deep, too profound to ever truly heal?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly hidden chapter of geopolitical history. We hope this exploration has given you a fresh perspective.
Join us next time on The Deep Dive, where we'll continue to unpack the complex, often hidden forces shaping our world.